everyone welcome to this event, and we're more than happy to have you. It's really my privilege to be the host of this conversation between two women you want to meet, especially once you've heard them. I had that chance a few days ago, and really was a pleasure. I mean, first of all, a quick reminder, as you all know, that we're holding this conversation in March, a month dedicated to celebrating women, which is the reason, really, it makes sense in this month that both our guests are women whose journeys illustrate the challenges and singularities of being artists today. As we will discuss shortly, the experiences really offer insights into how women create for change through arts, and we'll discuss what drives them to do so and how they deal with the many issues that their journey raises. So I'll start maybe with a few quick words about each of them, because I want them to be the ones really to tell you more about what they have done and their journeys. On my right-hand side, at least on my screen, Maliyamungu Muhande is a filmmaker from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and she lives in New York City. She started out in advertising, but arts, she says, is really what helped her to survive. Hello, Malia, and welcome to this event.
Hello, André Michel. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here with you all.
And we are excited to have you. On my left side is Roshni Lodhia, who's a photographer from Tanzania, living in the gorgeous city of Arusha, which I envy you for, because I happen to have lived there, and really you have the Mount Kilimanjaro, all the mountains, and you have a green space all around you. I'm really jealous that you live there and I don't. Roshni left behind a job in finance. You may have heard this kind of stories in the newspapers, in finance in New York City, of all places, to return home and find her way into arts. Hello, Roshni. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hi, thanks for that introduction. I think I'm all set. Good job on that. Yeah.
Look, the reason I wanted to say only a few words about the two of you is that I really want you to be the one to say more about yourselves. I mean, the truth is, the stories of your lives, as you shared them with us a few days ago, are full of twists and turns, and very interesting ones, and full of inspiration. So I'll start with Maliyamungu. You were born in the DRC, as I was saying. You've lived in South Africa for a short while, and now you are in the States. You started out in advertising, but you're now a filmmaker. Really, what's your story? Why all these twists and turns? Tell us. Try to tell us your story for us to get more about why you've done so many things in a short while.
I like that. I like twist and turn. I was reflecting yesterday on like core values, and to name the three that came up, the first was sustainability, the second was nourishment, and the third was discomfort and comfort. So the twist and turn is like trying to find a crack of comfort, but like the journey to it is so uncomfortable. But in that discomfort is where I think I find like the inspiration to express whatever's going on inside, and that medium has been art for me. And I don't think, throughout the traveling and the new environments, I never knew that art was where I was gonna land, or filmmaking for that matter. It started, back home in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I was specifically born in Lubumbashi. And then my mom grew up in Kinshasa. My dad grew up in Bukavu. And, just raised by two amazing Congolese parents in a Christian home, with very strict conservative ideals. And part of that was never me dreaming to be an artist. It just was, my dad is an accountant. So it was like accounting, doctor, maybe nurse. But it was never outside of those kind of like practical norms. Up until I really, had a culture shift in South Africa. So everything that I knew as normal quickly just like crumbled. I got to South Africa and, I went to a white school in the suburbs, and there was like two other Black girls, and that was already confusing for me at that time because I only studied with most people of color. I remember I had one Caucasian person in my school in Congo. So then I get there and I'm not accepted by either groups, either the white South Africans or the Black South Africans. I have to learn English because I never spoke English. So I learned it in 6 months. I was like walking around with a dictionary. So much was going on in my head at that time. And it created so much, like, again, discomfort. And the only place I could find comfort was in the art class. So then that's how I was introduced to art. Yeah.
It's a very fascinating story. And I love how you bring in your parents, because turning to Roshni, when I was reading about you, I just thought your journey reads as if you were trying to make your parents mad. I mean, you were raised in Arusha, you made your way to New York City. And as the song says, you made it in New York City, so you can make it everywhere. But then you decide to go back to Arusha and to leave a comfortable job in finance. What's the story?
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna circle back. I'm gonna circle back with saying that, that's exactly it. It was like the green card process. Since I was 16 years old, coming from an Indian subculture in Tanzania. So I felt like the only way out is getting to college, and that's it. So until I was 18, it was like chop, just study, get to the US, and there all the doors will open. And subsequently what happened is I ended up working in finance because by default, that's where you go. It's there's security there. You get your visas, etc. Lots of people know the story. But as around 27, when I turned 27, suddenly I couldn't justify living in New York City and the lifestyle that I had, having grown up in Tanzania. But I'd already fallen into this category, like, okay, you did it, you made it, you're an African Indian who made it in America, so there's no way out. So you feel caged. And I just remember this like distinct moment that I'd like to share, sitting in front of my computer in finance, in a suit, and just feeling like I'd picked up my phone and I was looking at photographs of a fellow photographer in Tanzania. And I was like, they can, they have the word privilege, like they have the privilege, but I don't, because I come from a small knit subculture and I've already made it this far. So just be thankful for what you've made, how far
That's
you've
interesting.
come.
Yes.
And so it was that moment where I was like, I think I need to make a change. And so we'll go into that later, like the change.
No, absolutely.
Back. Oof. Yeah.
I love it because I want to follow up with a quote you have in your signature blog. You sent an email and I was reading it, and it actually kind of sums up what you just said. There's a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. I will let you tell us about that quote because it's a gorgeous one. I have it in front of me. I will read it for you if you want, or you'll read it by yourself.
Can you read it?
Yes, the purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. That's a beautiful quote.
Thank you. I've had it for 10 years now.
What?
I've had it on that email for 10 years as a reminder. And every time I'm like, okay, it's 10 years. I should take it off. But really, it was a few years before I left New York City that I added that. And it was about like, in New York City, it looked great. My life looked great. I had friends at a job. I was in a suit. I was making more money than I'd ever imagined, except my heart was empty. It was desperate for a deeper meaning and purpose. And having lived in Tanzania, you're thinking, how can I give back? Is there a way I give back? And can I make a difference even in the smallest way? And so, yeah, I love that quote. And that quote says, the purpose is to be happy. All right. That's not to say that we shouldn't be happy.
No, of course not.
There's a difference. That's not to say, but that's not our purpose. That's not,
yes.
Because if that was my purpose, I'd still be in New York City, partying it up, hopefully, just going from gallery to gallery.
Absolutely.
But that wasn't my purpose.
I see, Malia, you nodding, and you're nodding in part, I guess, because in a way there are similarities between your journeys. You had a job in advertising, a big international company, which you left because of the calling somehow, which Roshni is talking about. Tell us more about it, Malia. How did you jump ships, literally?
So I worked I've worked with the South African Fashion Week and Ogilvy, and in that corporate field, there's a ladder, and there's security. You do it for a certain amount, and by the end you'll be CD or executive, creative director. But I left because, again, it wasn't fulfilling something. There was a depth, there was an emptiness. I was coming up with campaigns, I was working late, but there was, again, it's not that, sure, I was happy because the weekends, it's Cape Town, you have the mountains, there's moments of happiness, but the purpose is not fulfilled. The connection is not there. And I think for me, the shift coming to New York, it was the same. I was just kind of like, I need to leave what I know and try and dig for something bigger. And I came here with a certain plan, but I can tell you from the moment I stepped into my mentor now, but my professor then, from the moment I stepped into that class, the plan completely shifted. Anything that I had preconceived is different, and it's what I'm living now. But it's because it was full of purpose. And I loved what you said, Roshni, we can be happy, but emotions are inconsistent. So it's about what we're doing to get ourselves to those moments of satisfaction, those moments of happiness. What are we engaging in, and how does that align with who we are, who we truly are? So yeah.
Let me invite you before we get to the challenges.
Story.
Oh no, your stories are fantastic, both of you.
Yeah.
Really. So we're walking the path towards how you became an artist, and we've reached the point where you are artist, you are producing things, you're putting things out in the world. Both of you have been lucky in the past few days to really just immerse myself in what you produce. I mean, the movies, and you've done a few short ones on Malia, are just intimate. You learn something. The filming is great. I mean, I invite everyone to look at some of your movies. And Roshni, your photos, I mean, what should I say? Following you on Instagram is just one good way of waking up in the morning and just getting there. So at what point for each of you, once you started, I can imagine there were so many doubts. I mean, you both left comfortable, secure jobs. Then you get into this world. It's like swimming. I mean, I don't swim, so I've tried a few times. I know how it felt. I felt like I was drowning. Tell us about those moments where you had doubts and what made you keep going. And I might start with Malia, if you want.
Oh, I still have doubts. Last night I was up until 4 a.m. with doubts.
What?
Okay, so just how am I gonna make it as a Black woman in this field where I just don't have anybody close to me who's a model for it? Just,
yes,
because inherently I like to learn. I want to learn. I want to, in my films, I want to be around old people, older than me, and younger, like babies. So that's who I'm interested in, because I want to soak in the wisdom and I want to learn. So I really enjoy mentorship. I like conversation. I like asking questions. And I think, like I said, my core values, one of them is sustainability. So how do I sustain myself? How do I put a roof over my head
Yes.
for the next 10, 15 years? How do I feed myself? How do I care for myself in this capitalist world, pursuing something that's full of purpose, that's creative, as a Black woman, as an African woman in the West?
Yes.
Those are doubts that I deal with every time, just like deep fear of,
yes.
Yeah, that's just one of mine.
Roshni, what about you?
Roshni, I'm so curious because, you know, I look up to you and that bravery of, you know, leaving.
Yeah. It was, so after I left New York City, I think I cried and slept for 6 months straight.
Wow.
To say that, no kidding, my mom would be like, just do it, just cry if you need to, because it was like a process of, okay, I've left this, but in my head, I'm from New York City to Arusha, huge difference, okay?
Yes.
A city of all stimuli, everything is constantly on high alert, and then here it's like flat. But that was good for me, okay? So all right. So getting back here, I didn't initially know that it would be photography. So I had all these things lined up. I was like, okay, I'll go back and do a master's in business, obviously. And if it's business, it's got to be the top schools. So I thought I had backup plans until I started nibbling in photography. And now what I want to say after that is that it took 3-4 years, I want to say, for the extreme doubt to be lifted.
Yes.
There were days, Maria, where I've just done a shoot and then I'm not getting out of bed for a whole day. This was really intense because I was like, but am I good enough? Yes, I got paid. Yes, I got a client. Yes, I'm making it, but am I good enough? And I think that it was a constant fight, and it still is. But just recently, I was asked for a photograph that I took 3 years ago. So I went back and I was like, oh, what a hassle. Why are you making me do this? But when I went back, it gave me a chance to realize how far I've come. I was like, oh, this is so good. Like, I've come far in my doubt, in my performance as a photographer. And I want to share something that a saying that I keep saying to myself is, we underestimate how much we can achieve. We overestimate how much we can achieve in a year, but we underestimate how much we can achieve in 10 years. Because I'm not in this for a short run. I'm here for a long run, you know?
Voila.
So,
exactly.
So I think when you're having doubts, just like take a step back and look at how far you've come.
Yeah.
I'm so interested. I like hearing you talking about your doubts. And first of all, congratulations for sharing it with us, because I guess many people have gone through it. Although as a man, full disclosure, I have to say, I'm always amazed how women, you will have more doubts while at the same time being far more competent than men will ever do. You of course know and heard of it. Let me turn to one little thing in this whole process of you becoming artist. You've told us how you got there and when, but ultimately, why? Why are you doing this? Why do you do those movies you do, Malia? Why do you do those beautiful photos you post, Roshni? Why? Roshni first?
Okay, sure. It comes down to purpose and gifting. And the purpose, finding your gifting is so hard. It took me, I left at 27. I became a photographer at 31. So it took me 4 years to find that gifting without giving up. And there's many times you're doubting and feeling like giving up. And once you find it, what kind of photography? Why am I not doing wedding photography? Because there's also joy in that. But with me, it's documentary photography because I get to go into those communities. I get to spend time with them. I get to share their stories as a fly on the wall. you know, because
Yeah.
so I think that's the purpose behind it, is these connections that you make.
And which you want to share with the world, I guess.
Right. I speak Swahili, so, and I speak Gujarati and Hindi all very poorly, but I can, so I can connect on a deeper level. And it's my roots. So
Yes.
circling back to my roots and feeling like I can tell your story because I understand your culture, and I can speak the languages, and these stories need to be told. So in some way, my purpose, it feels like I'm walking into my purpose. I'm not sure if that's my full purpose, but it seems like it's the right direction.
No, it plays a role into it, and it's beautiful you say it, because those communities, and we'll come back to that, you're referring to, sometimes don't have their stories told out there that often. Malia, I'm coming back to you. You told me a few days ago when we had this conversation first, art literally helped me survive. In that, I find somehow the why of it. But tell us more.
I think, we spoke about doubt. We spoke about taking pictures and not waking up. There's emotional struggles that we all experience. There's mental health, there's identity crisis. There's, I love your why, Roshni, because it's similar to my why. It's being able to tell stories of underrepresented people, misrepresented people historically, and archiving those roots.
Nice.
That's my why. I'm archiving something that wasn't there when I needed it. It wasn't there when I was a kid growing up. I wasn't able to see those stories, and cinema is its own language. And when we see films, when we see pictures for you that constantly worship or show people who are not like us, what is that doing to us? What is it doing to my mental health? What is it doing to my sense of worth, my sense of value? So for a long time, I think I got to a point where I was looking in the mirror and I just was not seeing value and worth, because for so long I was taking in media information that was oppressive of who I truly was. So when I found my own voice, when I was able to hear my pain, my joys, and I was able to translate it into an artistic form, a medium, that saved me, because I would hit low, just like confusing places. I wouldn't see myself. And then there would be a voice in me that would translate into an art form that would say, you're enough.
Yeah.
And you can go on.
I love the way you tell your own stories, because they make us see some of the challenges you faced. And I want to stay there for a second. And I see that in the chat. In fact, someone just raised one of the questions about the challenges. But I want to start small. You are African women who grew up in Africa, went out and decided to go on a path where you're not often expected. So I can only imagine the pressure starting at home and outside with the friends and outside with the world at large. How was it for you, in fact, when you decided, well, this is what I actually need to do because this is where I feel best? Malia, let's start with you. I want to think a bit about your parents. Tell me how.
And they reacted parents to the whole thing. Is just one, but you're dealing with, it's confusing for everybody. It's confusing. I think what is the word independent filmmaker, independent photographer, independent without an entity, just me in the world practicing a craft and taking care of my livelihood like that. It's confusing. It's scary. And that fear, with also another thing like stigmatized mental health conversation, that fear translates to things that are hurtful without of my family knowing it. It was just it's confusing. The whole process, I obviously had to take it one step at a time. Initially I kind of want to jump in. I wanted to take a undergrad in fine arts, and there was a barrier. There was a what are you going to do with that? So then I had to reimagine what it looks like to be in the creative field. So then I took a BA in brand communication design. So I've also been like strategizing and producing my own life in conversation to the people around me for a really long time. So always finding how to make it, to kind of like tame your dream so that everybody's able to just like swallow it, because it's just new. It's something that we were never, did that answer your question?
I think it does, but I want to turn it to Roshni, because both of you sometimes have parallels and differences. Roshni just mentioned earlier on her mom, your mom who told you to cry as long as you wanted. And by the way, I love your mom, really. I mean, giving that advice when you're down, it's one of the best you can ever have. But tell me more about how your family, starting with your parents, reacted to your turn.
Yeah, I think that I've been very blessed to have both my mother, father, and sister that we waved at earlier, being very supportive. They didn't know where I would end up, but they knew that finance perhaps wasn't the right decision for me. So just creating that space for me, like, experiment, it's fine, experiment. That's to say, so I want to mention that I think looking for support is really important, whether that's through friendships, your church community, or whatever, your communities. I think, and it can be a few people, but looking for support, because you can't be expected to do it on your own. You can't. And as like you said, independent, what does that mean? It means you're independent for yourself, but you're dependent on others to lift you up when you need it.
Exactly. I really love that.
So some of the struggles I have had, I think so my family's been supportive, but I think society is where the struggles is. I think I was telling you where I went into this interview, and it was a phone interview, and I was so prepared, like, overly prepared. And he's like, the client had one question. They're like, okay, yeah, we saw everything. Your work's great. Just one question. Is this a hobby for you?
Yeah. I like that you touch onto that, because I wanted to throw it back in the context of Tanzania, where you grew up, Roshni, and the DRC, where Malia, you grew up. And I come from a country not that far away, Cameroon. Not only as a kid, girl, or you expected to do certain things and not others. But for you as women, I have sisters, you expected even more not to stray away from the conventional roles. So when you say you want to be artist, I can only imagine how crazy that must have sounded, if not for your parents, at least for the people around you. And I'm amazed by how you both manage to play around these expectations and go back to it. And really, congratulations to you. One other thing I want to touch on, when you dream of anything, you need models. I mean, you've touched on it already, Malia, but both of you, did you have any around you? I mean, filmmaker, photographers. Malia, did you?
I did. So the big turnaround, when I felt like I could stop fighting, at least to make myself believe I could do it, because it was just like unknown territory. In my second year, I met a woman, Carissa Samuel, who's a South African Indian woman. And she basically created a program called Rockstart that funds student education in creative fields. And in South Africa, anybody who's been to South Africa, it is almost impossible as a foreigner to get a scholarship, because they have a thing called BEE, where they prioritize Black South Africans, and there's a ladder, and we're last. So then by the time it gets to people that come from other African countries, there's nothing left. I knocked on doors and doors and doors, because it was a private institution, and Carissa Samuel believed in me, and she paid for 2 of my undergrad tuition, 2 years. Yeah. So it's those moments, when I graduated from high school, I won a prize for my artworks. So those moments that my parents now started seeing that I was being recognized for this thing that I was doing. So then it started shifting the conversation So in that moment, I remember the first time that my artwork was put up in my home, and I could not believe it. My parents put it up, and I was, it gets me a little emotional. I was just like, okay, there's like a turnaround.
This
and
could
then
happen.
I get a scholarship, because it was a private school and it was outside of like our means, but I get a scholarship that covers 2 years. And then they're like, okay. So that's one of my mentor. And she really, she started making me think about mindfulness, being connected to self and the world that's around you. So every weekend I would go to the office. It was at Ogilvy. And that's where I was I started now asking questions about mental health, about mindfulness. So she really was the foundation that I needed to continue that journey. And that was in 2015 and 16. And from that, I've just built up, and I've been able to learn more from elders because I know which questions to ask, because I know what I need.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is really important. Roshni, do you have one person or some person that person who opened the door for you or who served as role model, as Malia just mentioned?
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat list, and I think there's a bunch of
there's
artists.
So many questions, and we'll move into them in a few seconds. Yes.
Yeah, there's a bunch of artists who are asking about mentorship is key. It's so important, and the thing is, I had to seek it out. It doesn't sometimes come naturally, or they just don't walk into your life and be like, hey, this is great. I had to seek it out. And I want to say that I also sought them out in different fields, because yes, I have mentors who are photographers, but they're not really good at pricing. So because they're artists and they're creative. So then I would seek out other mentors to be like, how can I be a professional and an artist? How can I build up a brand? How can I build up the right pricing? Someone you can call when someone just knocks you pricing down, and you're like, okay, what do I do about this? So mentors are key, and you got to sometimes just seek them out.
Yeah.
Pursue them. Some rejected me, literally. They rejected. They were like, yeah, I think maybe I was too small of an artist. But, I still kept going. So I would really recommend seeking out mentors.
And we'll ask one question, then we'll move to the Q&A, because there are a lot of questions in the chat, and Alicia will help us out in a second. But one thing you both touched on, which fascinated me as when I met you, is the fact that you all had to deal with who you are and an identity issue in a way, if only for Maliyamungu, leaving your country, the DRC, and finding yourself in South Africa, where the whole issue of identity and racism is really key in how you face the world. And now in New York City, where, you just arrived at the moment where the US and New York has to go through it. And Roshni, you are a minority in a country, Tanzania, where you grew up, and you're from Indian descent, which also comes with its own particularities and challenges. So I want both of you to just tell me, what is the place of who you are in terms of identity in your arts, and how it impacts your arts? Maybe, Roshni, you go first.
Okay. So identity and concept of home is something that I've struggled with for a very long time, because I'm Indian, third generation Indian in Tanzania. So yes, I'm in love with Tanzania, but when I go out, I'm not fully accepted. And if I go to India with my accent, I'm not fully accepted. And so these are things that you really have to wrestle with, And then becoming a photographer, I just want to say, then you cling onto that as your identity. But is that your identity? Because during Corona, when you don't have jobs, when you're a freelancer and you don't have something for 2 months, you're going to collapse, because you're like, well, that was my identity. So I think the concept of identity is something you really have to wrestle with and figure out. Home to me now is where my family is. It's taken me time to figure out home. Yes. And so identity is my family, and it's my faith. Photography is part of my identity, but it's not all of it. And I think that that's really important to figure out, not to completely lay all your eggs or all your weight on what you do.
Yes.
It might change over time.
It can be an uncomfortable situation to find yourself not having one place to put all your eggs, but at the same time, it's a privilege, right? Because you can see the world from different perspectives.
Right.
And Malia, how has it been for you?
You know, last time we spoke before, the word belonging came up. Roshni brought up belonging. And, you know, I realized it took me leaving the Democratic Republic of Congo to really realize that, like, knowing where I come from gives me a vision of where I'm going.
Woo,
and where I come from.
That's beautiful.
And where I come from, it's not a coincidence. So I know I belong to a land. I know I belong to a people. But ultimately, like, the reality is, in my search for betterment, in my search for getting to know myself deeply and finding spaces that allow that, I had to get to know that I belong in here. There's something in me that's like truly where is home. So I know that my journey and my creative practices deal with roots, belonging, archiving, representation. But I think it's in me. It's here. And I think the twist and turn that you were speaking about, André Michel, that twist and turn is just finding spaces that allow for that discovery and that curiosity. Because yes, I'm born in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and that's where I know that I'm fighting to archive a story that has been misrepresented for years. But at the time, I wouldn't have been allowed to really be curious in that way. I had to travel to start questioning the status quo. You know, that it's so important. You know, part of our story is like in our travel, coming here, going back, But I think it's worth really saying that the traveling is what pushes you into places of discomfort to question, you know, what is accessible and what is not accessible, and why is it not accessible to me? Why is art not accessible? Why was I never told that I could be a filmmaker or photographer? Why? And then believing that you can access it, you know?
Those are words of wisdom and insight, really. I mean, I said earlier that I was privileged to talk to you. I feel like that, but I would be mean and not nice if I wasn't sharing that with the rest, because I see a lot of questions in the chat. So I will give it to Alicia to introduce some of these questions to you, Malia and Roshni. Alicia, over to you.
The comments are going wild. I think everyone is really connecting to you two ladies. I just want to share a few, before we go into questions, I want to share a few of the comments that I think are really great and really sweet to both you, Malia and Roshni. Ellen wrote, I resonate with these stories so deeply. What I should have been doing versus what I am doing are two ends of a spectrum. Also, I think, Roshni, when you spoke about the hobby comment that someone gave you, that really resonated with a lot of people, I think. We have a lot of comments here about the questioning of hobbies. Ellen also wrote, is this a hobby for you? There is grace for clients that we have in Tanzania and worldwide. We have Nikita wrote, gender roles are overrated, totally overrated. And Kelsey agreeing that the hobby comments are worldwide. So yeah, I think your comments in regards to this have really resonated with everyone. Georgina wrote, undervaluing the work that artists do is definitely a worldwide thing. Why can't grace and other things be worldwide too? But alas, maybe that's another story and meeting. And also, so Kawumba, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, wrote amazing 2 different stories with a similar end result, success. Not only is achieving dreams breaking molds and barriers, but in showing how one can realize their dreams or visions. Powerful impact to be made on many who will continue to follow your respective journeys. Thank you all for these great comments. So let's move into the questions. I saw a lot of really thoughtful questions in our Q&A portion. So Christine wrote, what advice would you have for creatives who are also struggling with doubts and finding a place in their industry?
Who's gonna answer?
Anyone.
Roshni, go on, and then Malia. When you ask, you get the floor. That's
There
exactly
we
what
go.
happens.
Love that.
I think we sort of touched on this. Is for me, it's mentors. Talk to mentors. You're not alone in your doubts. You know, doubts they're toxic and they're heavy, but you're not alone in them. So talk to people, have mentors, and for me, look back on how far you've achieved and how far you're gonna go. Time is, we underestimate time. We don't put that as a factor for us. Like, yeah, we're always looking short term.
Yeah. And
Amalia, what would you say?
I think find your tribe, which is basically like mentor, but find a community find a tribe that you trust, because that will allow you to really show up as yourself. That is so important for me. I need to be able to find a community like the Audaz women where I can show up. I remember the first meeting we had, and I was not pretending to be anybody I was not. I was vulnerable. I was connecting with them, and I told it like it was. And I think that's so important, because once you have that like tribe, that comfort unlocks like endless potential to be fully seen, and for that potential to be recognized and supported, believed in, is just amazing. It's and also important, people who look like you, people that you can see that you are like me, because there's something I still can't really articulate what that magic moment is, but when you find it and you just see this person also went through all these social construct, these ideas, but there was a breakthrough. So finding your tribe and really be who you truly are, and let people fully see that, hear you, and support your journey, and also give back.
And if I may, as a man, maybe one thing that trended on social media over the past few months was, ladies, please walk in anywhere you walk into with the confidence of a mediocre white man. You often forget that, but so if you can have that would be helpful. Alicia, back to you.
I want to add that Nicolette also wrote in the chat, I think a mentor is crucial for communication, visual strategies, and general growth for the artist, also for motivation, suggestions, and support. So I think that's also encompassing that sense of a community, that sense of having someone on your team, like-mindedness. So Georgina has a question. Do you think it helps to go to university? I'm self-taught in photography and have some mentors. And Elaine also added, and does it affect how clients view your work? So do you think it helps to go to university? Georgina herself is self-taught, and Elaine added, does it affect how clients view your work if you went to university versus being self-taught?
Malia, you go first.
For me, it's a matter of discipline. And I know that I needed university, because it's one, by now we know my story. It was such just like unknown territory. And I personally just lacked the courage to just jump by myself. I needed those professors that are now mentors. But I don't think, the question is helps versus need. So I think for me personally, it did help in just like finding community, and I'd still, sometimes when you're in university, you're like, I did definitely ask myself, like, why am I paying so much for this? And all these questions come up. So like Roshni said, time will tell. I think you just do the best you can if you have the opportunity, and you have people who can support you with, because it's just so expensive. But I think discipline, I think it's a field that if you have the equipment and you just go and you create the work and the portfolio, that's the thing. Undeniable work is undeniable work. If you like, and that's the one place like creativity can, the work speaks for itself. You can have, there's a difference between talent and hard work and discipline. And I struggle with that sometimes, like to just be disciplined, but the work, take a picture of a stranger a day. That's a practice that I took to just understand light. So I take pictures of strangers. And just from those interactions, one, you're pushing yourself to connect, with people you don't know, and to understand light, and you practicing your eye, looking at artworks, understanding composition, and now with YouTube and internet, we have access to like master classes, so just really like diving deep into whatever craft you're trying to pursue, do your research, and just be disciplined that every single day, it's like you're going to the office. And I'm saying this, and it's a reminder to myself as well, because I think it's a really difficult thing. It's that like get up, that oomph. But I think it may help some and it may not others. But I think at the end of the day, it's like your passion is your drive will help you reach those goals. Like anything, success is inevitable when you put in the work, I think.
Discipline is a key word. I love it. Roshni, what's your take on it?
I'm going to answer, how does it affect how clients view your work?
Yeah.
I'm self-taught. I went to school for business. So I did go to university, but I'm doing something completely different. And what I want to say is that, sort of echo what you're saying, that once you create your brand, then brand and professionalism. I think what ended up happening is, because I had to be so professional in the way that I wrote my emails and interacted with people, almost stoic in the way that I was doing the emails, that as when I took that aspect of what I'd learned in business into photography, it gave me a higher level of professionalism. Because what clients are looking for, at least in photography, are you on time? Are you meeting your deliverables? And we're creatives. Oh, give me space, give me time. I love that. But a lot of the times, man, they're just looking for, listen, you're a good photographer, but I really just need it on time. So I think the professionalism aspect is really important. And once you get that under your belt, and that branding, that you're professional and you're such a creative, clients tend to view you different. Like, then you've already set your brand. So until now, no one's really asked me if I have a university degree. I think it'd be different if I was in the US, because where you go to university is it has been in the past put such a weight, like it's part of who you are, your definition. Yeah. But I think that's changing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Alicia?
So let's move on to another question. So Nicolette would like to ask, which is the thing where you find more difficulties in being a woman artist?
Yeah, Roshni, go on.
Wait, so being I'm not quite sure.
So what is one thing that you find the most difficult in being a woman artist?
Okay, sometimes just not seen.
Yes.
And not taken seriously. I've gotten into I'm setting up the whole interview and ready to do an interview, and they'll be like, oh, but you're just a kid and you're just like a girl. Is this an internship for you? And then I've had to explain that, no, I'm being paid for this. So not been taken seriously. And particularly in Tanzania, when you go into like the more, into the bush, further out of the cities, as a female, you're just kind of in the background. So they'll like greet everyone and you're standing right there and they'll just skip you. So that's been difficult, but I want to say I've used it also to help me take better photographs, because then sometimes you're just, as a documentary photographer, then you can just be a fly on the wall. I've introduced myself, I've done that, and now because you're not acknowledging who I am in the way that you would a man, I'm just going to take advantage of this and use it to become a better photographer.
Well, and to anyone who hasn't looked at your Instagram account, really, they should go and look, and they will realize how, well, I don't want to say dumb, but dumb people who take you as a kid or someone who can't do the job, because the pictures on your account are just gorgeous, and they literally document life in East Africa, at least for those I've seen in Kenya and Tanzania. And well, the people are beautiful, the locations are gorgeous. It's just a pleasure. Malia, to you the same question.
It's such a hard one because, you know, someone mentioned gender roles are so overrated. So I see myself outside of that. So my drive, call me a man if you want, woman. I'm not seeing myself in any construct. So when I walk into a room, it can be a room full of men, I'm there. And I think the barrier is it's the work they need to do in themselves.
Yeah.
You know, to look past them, those ideas. But it won't get in my way, because, you know, it's when you're celebrated, when there's an article, there's like a lot of men in Women's Month. Happy Women's Month, Women's Day. What are you actively doing to support women? Outside of that, like, because, you know, so many privileges in, you know, men. You have the funding, you have the money. No, it's undeniable. All the money is there. So I think, like, I'm just encouraging men, put money into the hands of women artists and allow women artists to thrive.
Yeah.
I love that call.
Yeah.
I love that call. I've been told a second ago that although we have passed the hour mark, which was supposed to be the end, you are generating so much interest and questions and comments that we are allowed to do a few more before we end. So if you allow, I mean, Alicia has a few more for you. Thank you.
I'm gonna, before we go back into questions, I'm gonna jump into some of the comments because we have a lot of really good comments. Ellen says, I would say the pay scale gap is also very different. It is hard to be paid decent money as a woman. The mentality that I am being supported by someone behind the scenes, therefore I don't deserve to get paid as much, or that I waste my money on my hair or something. Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Because women don't have bills and stuff to pay other money on, but yeah.
Except for hair.
Yeah.
Koumba writes, support, especially moral, is definitely important. What is your advice for a young African woman, for example, who has parents who want her to follow the conventional education path, college, university, etc., at home or abroad? And that young woman decides that she wants to follow the unconventional path. How do you convince mentalities and way of thinking?
Yeah,
I think
I see you, Maria. Please go on.
You have you, and you can go the conventional way that the world wants you to go in, but at the end of the day, that unhappiness, when you go to bed with yourself. And that's a conversation that, you know, we need to take it back to being mindful and connected with yourself. Who are you? And answering those questions and nourishing that voice inside of you that wants to break away. Once you do that, at least when you make, because they're tough decisions. When you make those decisions, you'll know that you're hearing yourself and you're doing something that's aligned with your true purpose. So I would just encourage you to just, even if it's journaling, basically hone and nourish that voice inside you so that your voice can come out and can speak. And it doesn't mean that people are going to agree, but it's a battle, but it's worth fighting for. It really is worth fighting for, you know, because sometimes I stop and I'm like, wow, I'm in New York. My grandmother is from Bukavu. My grandmother sold charcoal as a single mother, taking care of 4 kids in Bukavu. and I'm in New York and I'm pursuing something and I'm happy, I'm content. How? And it didn't come overnight. It's just step by step, staying true to yourself. Staying true, like, you know, in African culture, they'll say you're demon possessed. So much will come your way, but stay true. Find who you are. Find that voice and nourish it. Water, you know, just a cup a day, and let it flourish. And know that you have you, and that can be enough, you know. And your tribe will come afterwards. I hope that answers your question, because it's such an important one.
Roshni, I saw you nodding.
I love listening to you.
Oh,
I could just do
I love listening
a whole
to
seminar
you.
just listening to you. And I wanted to add that also knowing that it's going to be an uphill battle.
Voila.
That's important, you know, because we are taught to, also we are fed on social media and media in general that it should be easier. Things should be easier. Well, it's not. Reality is that it's not. So just knowing that know in the back of your head that other people have gone through it, seek out people who have gone through it. So you have that as a, you know, you can talk to somebody like Malia, you know? So just knowing the truth that it's an uphill battle. And that helps, because then you're not fighting realities like, oh, but it should be easier, but it's not. It is an uphill battle.
So I want to ask this final question from Ellen. And Ellen writes, what's your opinion on using an agency as opposed to building your own brand and dealing with clients directly for sustainable work as a creative? So what's your opinion on using an agency as opposed to building your own brand and dealing with clients directly for sustainable work as a creative?
And Roshni, you're well placed because you have chosen your way into the world.
Okay, so do you mean, Ellen? Okay, I'm not quite sure I understand, but I think that it's first and foremost, creating your brand is key. Whether you're going to join another agency or not, creating your own brand is key. It's who you are. It establishes your professionalism. And then I do both. So I'm a freelancer, but I also work with agencies. But the agencies, if that makes sense, hire me because they already know my brand.
Yeah.
And then if it's an agency that you're joining for purposes of like learning and growing, that's okay too. Depending on the stage you're at, if it's an agency where you're like, I'm going to be full-time working with you, then think about what your growth aspect is. Where are you in your spectrum? Are you in a place to be, you want to work with an agency full-time so you can grow? In that growth, you will be developing your own brand for sure. Or are you at a stage where you do both, like I do? So I have my own clients. And the thing about clients is, what I found in the past 5 years is, once you've established a relationship, it's about relationship. Once you establish a relationship, they'll keep coming back. So it's not just your photography, it's your brand. Have you connected with them? I hope that answers your question.
Oh, no, that's a fantastic answer, Malia, please.
No, I completely agree. And you know what Roshni is saying is a reminder to me too, you know, like that our own brand first, so that wherever you go, you are known as Maliyamungu, and this is what you're about. Because whether you're working for an agency or for a client, they're both seeking out the same thing. You know, they're both seeking out to know that they're bringing someone on their team who knows what their work is, who knows their artistic eye. And it's about relationship, because I think it's also about finding what works for you. If you're able to manage like all that needs to be manageable when you're independent, then you probably don't need a middleman. But I think both relationships are important. I treasure both for sure.
Yeah. Maybe one really last thing, because I wouldn't stop listening to you if I stayed online with you, and I think other feel like it. I will give you a chance, maybe in a few seconds, each of you, Roshni first, then Malia. Is there one piece of advice, one thing you may not have touched on, or you want to emphasize again for everyone who woke up on this side, at least, to listen to you today? One final word of wisdom from really two brilliant
no
women
pressure.
artists. Absolutely none.
Yeah, what I want to end on is, a lot of the times I get comments like, "You're so cool, you're so different as a woman." And although those are very good compliments, like, "Oh, you made it as a photographer, you're so cool," or "You're outgoing," and as a photographer, what that does is that separates me from the rest of my women tribe. What that does is, you're saying I'm the exception to the rule,
Yeah.
but I'm not.
Voila.
Thing is, I'm not the exception to the rule. You can do it too, so that's what I want to take away. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not the exception to the rule.
Great point, because as women of color in the field of art, this is really important because we've heard it often. Malia, last word?
I'm going to connect that because, don't put yourself on a pedestal. Stay at zero ground. Zero ground is so important. Once you achieve something, it's important to look at where you've been, celebrate, but then remember where you're trying to go, and that it's not finished. So humility, loving yourself, really connecting with who you are, your mental health, just reading about like what's going on when you're sleeping, what's going on throughout the day, what are some rituals that you can have in your day that reminds you that you are a spirit in a body and you have a soul, and making sure that you nourish all those aspects of self. Because once that is nourished, endless possibilities to connect greater, for people to find more alignment, for things to just fall into place. And that's something that I'm feeling. I mean, being here is a big testament to that. To just like knowing who I am, healing my past traumas, and believing that I am worth connecting with Audaz community, with Andre Michel, with Roshni. I am worth this. And I deserve nice things. It's like, so just like
you do.
finding that voice and loving yourself and nourishing yourself. Because if you don't do it, nobody's going to do it. And it starts there.
You absolutely do. Look, I can't say enough how privileged I am. And everyone in the chat is saying thank you. But I really have to say thank you even more than them, because meeting you, listening to you is inspiring. It's a lesson in life. It's opening a world I've only seen in passing. And really, thank you for this fantastic conversation, one in many we have to have over the next few months and years. I'm wishing you the best, and thank you. And I will hand it over to Alicia to conclude.
Thank you, ladies, again so much. And Andre Michel as our host. I want to share a last and final comment from Kelsey, because I think she kind of infiltrated my mind and just read what I was going to say. She writes, "Thank you to Maliyamungu for your insight on self-worth and truth-telling. Roshni, thank you for clarifying the steps needed to take to follow your dreams. Andre Michel, excellent moderator skills. Your responses and questions were very empowering. And lastly, thank you, Audaz Group, for bringing us all together today. I feel more hopeful than I did this morning." Kelsey, I want to say thank you to you and all of the other attendees. This is truly, as events director for Audaz Group, this is really what we do these events for, especially in a time where we cannot connect personally. This virtual connection is what we have right now and what we're trying to make the best of. And I hope that we were able to make that connection today. And I see a lot of us wanting to connect in the chat. We are going to be sending a virtual goodie bag to all of our attendees with not only some real goodies in it, but also the social media connections for Roshni and Maliyamungu, so that you can also connect with them on social media and further this community and community building that we love here in Audaz. So again, thank you to everyone who's attended. Roshni, Maliyamungu, the great Andre Michaud for hosting.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellence.
Not be the last.
Thank you.
Please be sure to follow. Please be sure to follow Audaz on all social media groups. Here's our social media handles. Please follow us, connect with us, interact with us. We love the comments. We love when people reach out and say, hey, I would love to see this. I'd love to do that. We love to pair with people. We love to connect with our community. So please join your part of us on all of these groups. And that's it. Enjoy the rest of your nights and days. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Roshni. Thank you, Andre.
guys.
Thank you.